There are those in the Christian faith who want to argue that somehow religion or faith or God keep us from suffering if we're doing it right. And so there's always kind of that caveat that if we're suffering, then we must have done something wrong. That was what Job's friends accused Job of, and God kind of challenged their thinking on that. But one of the things that suffering does, I think, to all of us is that it isolates us. It makes us assume that we are alone. It makes us assume that we must undergo this suffering all on our own. We must power through somehow. That's certainly true in the 21st century in the United States of America. Suffering isn't something that we're necessarily allowed to share with each other. And yet the entirety of the message of Scripture, if we read, I don't think have to read that carefully. The entirety of Scripture points to a God that seeks to be with us. That's the purpose of the creation, of covenant, of the law. It's the purpose of the incarnation, that God longs to be with us, that rather than helping us avoid suffering or keeping these bad things from happening, God instead chooses to play by the same rules, chooses to join us in that suffering. That's what the incarnation is God joining us in all that it means to be human, even the ugly parts. And so one of the things that I think we sometimes forget in all of this, when we face challenges or suffering or grief, what we fail to understand is that the purpose of faith and religion was never to prevent those kinds of things. But the purpose of faith and religion is to point to and remind us of a God that chooses to join us in it. Do bad things happen to people who don't deserve it? Yes, all the time. If we think that the purposes of God are to prevent those kinds of things from happening, I think we miss the point. And when we miss the point and we feel as though we must suffer through or struggle through these things on our own, then we lose the ability to actually heal. Henry Nouwen once said that healing begins when we take our pain out of its diabolical isolation and see that whatever we suffer it in communion with all of humanity. I might add that we suffer it also in communion with God, that the only way to truly heal is to recognize that we don't have to do it alone, that we that all of humanity joins us in this suffering, whatever it may be. We are not isolated. We are not alone. We are called to join in all of this together. That's a part of the purpose of the church, is to come alongside each other, to be together, to join or to grieve when with one another, to celebrate with one another, and also to point one another to a God that doesn't stand aloof off somewhere in the distance, but a God instead who chose very, very deliberately to take on all that it means to be human, including this suffering. And so as we stop and think about all of those questions, like why do these bad things happen to good people, it's a legitimate question. It's one that I wish I had an answer to. I don't have an answer for it, but I do think there is something to be found in the realization that we don't have to suffer alone, that isolation and separation from one another is antithetical to the work of God in the world, a God who wants to join with us. That's what we seek to practice in worship. It's what we seek to practice as a worshiping community, and it's what we as a church here at First Presbyterian Church should be and are all about.